Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rukus Reviews. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these videos, and I'll probably be lessening the amount of videos that I wind up doing in the future as opposed to last year, as I focus more on developing my own games. But in the future, I'll probably be focusing more on games that I feel really need to be highlighted, including the game that I'm going to show you today, which is called The Green Box of Games. Of a bunch of different games that all use the same components. The box that I have has 16 games in the book from the initial publishing of the game. But then in 2018 there was another contest done from which 6 other winners were picked. I'm not really sure how many of them will be added to the box, if it'll just be the 6 or more of the 14 games that were entered into the contest. The games all share the same pieces, though they don't all use every piece that's in the box. And they range everywhere from abstract games to games that try to incorporate some theme into them. There's strategy games, there's family games, there's games for 2 people, games for larger groups of people. Really, there is a decent variety of stuff in here and probably something for pretty much everyone. The components themselves in the game aren't actually too bad. There's a ton of these wooden cubes that come in 4 different colors, a couple wooden dice, a bunch of cardboard tiles with different symbols on them that are green on the front and all have the same yellow backing to them. And a whole deck of cards that has basically the same symbols that are on the tiles on one end, and on the other end just has a bunch of pips on it. One really cool thing about the tiles, other than the interesting little designs that they chose to use for them, is something I didn't even notice until I was playing a game that actually required you to pay attention to this. There's actually pips on these tiles as well. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now the number of pips on the images themselves don't always match the number that's on the cards that they appear on. The number of pips in the dice looking section of the card always does. And of course all of these cards come in a variety of all the different colors. They have different colored outlines like white and yellow and blue. These are mostly the standard colors that are on the cubes, with the exception of white and black, which aren't on the cubes but are on the cards. They also have different colored backgrounds. This one has yellow and green, and this one has red. All of those little slight variations are definitely used in various different games. There are some games that use the outlines and they have cubes that line up with the outlines or the backgrounds to suggest different things. The pips, the numbers on the dice, the images on the pieces and how they line up with the tiles themselves. Essentially, this design has done a really good job at allowing a bunch of different designers to create a bunch of different games that essentially just utilize whatever parts of this design that they wanted to use. So there are a bunch of games in this box, but I'm really going to talk mostly about 3 of them. These 3 are from the second set of games that won the contest last year, and they're really major standouts for me. The first of these games won Best Abstract Game, and it's called Oki. In Oki, players take the tiles and they take turns laying out the board however they want to, and then once they're done laying out the board, the first player lays down 1 cube, and then in turn order, they continue to lay as many cubes as they want to down on the board, but they have to always be touching another cube where they're laid down, either orthogonally or diagonally, and they have to be part of a straight line. There can be breaks in the line, but you have to be able to draw a straight line that goes through all of those pieces. This is a very interesting strategy game with the back and forth of trying to figure out how many pieces you want to lay down, because the goal of the game is not to get the most pieces on the board, it's actually to get the last piece that's placed on the board. So what you want to do is set yourself up to where you can try and set your opponent up to where they wind up having to be the one who places the piece before last, but can't play the last piece. Of course, there is the risk that you could wind up just playing it and placing 1 piece at a time, and then it's just kind of like whoever's left over at the end is the winner. But even in that case, if that's what you're doing throughout most of the beginning of the game, at some point, you still got to make sure that you're not accidentally setting up your opponent so that they can put down just a whole bunch of pieces at some point and cause you to lose because they decided to start playing a little bit differently. The second game that I want to talk about is Grid Block. Grid Block was voted as the best original game, meaning that it wasn't based on some other game that somebody had made before. Grid Block is a pretty cool game because both players basically have 6 cards. The cards have numbers on them and they have symbols on them that match the tiles that are on the board. And players draw a number of cards and then choose which cards that they want to play. When you've chosen the card that you want to play, you lay down the card and then you move your piece along the board the number of spaces that's written on the card. You can move it in any direction, you just can't go through the same space twice in a single movement. And then, if the space where you ended your movement matches the symbol that's on that card, the same one that you played to move, then you're allowed to place a cube down on one of the corners of that piece. Players will keep doing this over the course of the game, but in any instances where a place that you want to lay a cube has already gotten all 4 corners taken up, you're not able to lay a cube there anymore. Basically, players get 18 opportunities to do this, always drawing 3 cards and choosing the order in which they want to play those 3 cards so that they can get the optimal number of cubes laid on the board. It's not just about figuring out which card you should lay and where you should go to be able to get yourself a cube put on the board this turn. There's also the strategy of knowing that you're going to have to choose one of those 2 other cards on the next turn. So which one of these is going to be the optimal solution so that you can try your best to get 3 cubes laid on the board over the course of the next 3 turns. Finally, after 18 times back and forth of going through and doing this, the players will be out of cubes, because if you don't get to lay a cube down on the board, you're supposed to just remove it from the game, and then the player who has the most cubes on the board is the winner. I really enjoyed the strategy of this. I played it with my daughter. She really enjoyed it quite a bit too. There's definitely some interesting decisions that go into it. I really like the fact that you've got the 3 cards and it's not just about what you're doing now, but what you're going to be doing on future turns, planning for now, planning ahead, trying to optimize all of that stuff, but also having to deal with the fact that your opponent is on the board moving around. And when the number of corners that are available starts to get low, it really starts to get tight and you're really trying to figure out, because you might have some good valid moves, but those moves don't lead you to a good corner to be able to put pieces. And every time that your opponent moves, there's a possibility they'll also move into the space that you had planned to move. The final game that I wanted to talk about is a game I liked for a little bit of a different reason than I like the other 2. And that one is called Business Casual. Business Casual was voted as the best 2-player only game in the collection. Now I, as someone who generally plays 2-player games, of course, had to try this one out. And I played this one with my daughter as well, and it was actually like really fun. The theme to it is actually really funny. Basically, the theme is you're sitting in cubicles in an office and you want to be dressed better than the people around you, but you don't want to be dressed so much better that it's obnoxious. So basically, you're just laying your workers down in this cubicle area and trying to make sure that your worker is sitting next to another worker who is dressed either better enough than they are that that other person starts to look obnoxious, or the people are dressed not as well as them so that they look better than those other people. This is measured by the value difference between the piece that you lay down and the pieces that are already on the board. If the value difference between the piece you place down and the pieces already on the board is odd, then the piece you place down needs to be higher than the opponent. If the value difference between the piece you place down is even, then the value needs to be lower than the piece that was already on the board. So if you placed a 3, for instance, and you placed it next to a 2, a 5, and a 4, then you would get points for the 2 that you placed it next to because it's 1 higher. You would get points for the 5 you placed it next to because it's 2 lower, but then your opponent would score a point for the 4 you placed it next to because it's 1 lower, which means that the piece that was already on the board looks better than the piece that you placed. Of course, there are 2 twists to this. First is the 1 value tiles. The 1 value tiles represent new hires. And every time a new hire is placed on the board, the next player has to play a piece next to the new hire. Through this, your opponent could technically wind up forcing you to place pieces that will actually give them points. And the other twist is the number 6 tile. There's only one of those in the deck, and that is the boss. So nobody wants to sit next to the boss because nobody wants him monitoring everything that they're doing. So once the boss is placed, though it can be placed anywhere on the board, all of the pieces adjacent to the boss are no longer available to be placed in. This means that most of the time you won't actually wind up using every single tile. This game was really fun. My daughter and I both bought into the theme and really enjoyed it, and enjoyed the idea of trying to look better than everybody else, but not obnoxiously so, and then everyone wanting to stay away from the boss, but having to, be near the new hires so they can help them out. And again, the strategy of the game was actually pretty good too. I would put it below Gridlock due to having a little bit less control over what you're doing, but probably above Oki due to it being a little bit more complex and interesting. There are a couple of issues with the game, some things that I could definitely see people having a problem with to the extent that they wouldn't want the game, and some things that I kind of just wish could be better. Because this game is designed to be a game with many, many different games in it, and all of the pieces have to be able to accommodate all of those games that are being added to it. It is kind of weird moving from one game to the next, and just using all of the same pieces. My wife actually didn't really enjoy any of the games that we played because it was just too abstract. She wasn't able to buy into the theme of business casual, and she really struggled beyond that with playing different games and using the same pieces. And she's a really big fan of theme, and so it really just wasn't her game. And to me, it's a little bit disappointing that a game so fun as business casual is being used in such an abstract manner. I kind of wish that it was kind of its own game where the theme could really be fleshed out and we could really see the cubicles and the people that you're placing down on them. And there were even some games that were a little bit heavier that tried to push the theme a little bit, and I really wasn't able to buy into it on those either. But really, that's the only downside that I see to the game, is the fact that it is so abstract. Ultimately, I thought the game was really fun. I really enjoyed that there's so many different games that you can play. If you don't like certain games, then there's always other kinds of games that are available in there. There's a lot of games in there that I haven't yet been able to get to, and I'm really looking forward to playing those. They have a really nice layout in here that kind of tells you family weight to strategy weight and the traditional style of games down at the bottom. And I'm really hoping that they have another contest. I might even would like to put my own game in there, as well as just continuing to get more games to add even more value to this little collection of games. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Green Box of Games. Feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Until then, Rukus.